Welcome to Diabetes Day by Day, the American Diabetes Association's official podcast. On this podcast, we often talk about topics relevant to both those living with type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Today, though, for this special edition, we'd like to shift to a specific audience, and that is teenagers living with type 1 diabetes. The teenage years are a formative time for all of us, and adding in the challenge of learning diabetes self-management can be more than a little bit tricky. Today, we're going to dive in and talk through some of the challenges for teens living with type 1 diabetes and how to address some of those challenges. I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, professor of family and community medicine in the Sidney Kimmel Medical College of Thomas Jefferson University, and joining me as always is my co-host.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Sara Wettergreen, an assistant professor at the University of Colorado Skaggs School of Pharmacy and an ambulatory care clinical pharmacist.
Joining us today is a special guest, Nathan Bekelman. Nathan is a teenager living in the Denver, Colorado area who has many interests. He runs cross country and track. He plays flute in the band. He works at an ice cream shop and does all of this while living, and actually, if I'm going to be more honest about it, I'm going to say thriving with type 1 diabetes. Nathan, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Neil and Sarah.
Nathan, you recently shared your story and advice for how teens can thrive with type 1 diabetes in a major diabetes journal called Diabetes Spectrum. For all of our listeners out there, I so recommend you go to Diabetes Spectrum and download and read that article. Nathan, it was courageous to share your story. It was informative. And I got to tell you, on a personal level, I came away inspired. It was honest. It took courage. What inspired you to write the article?
Yeah, so I had a lot of questions after I was diagnosed with type 1, and I feel like I learned a lot, and I wanted to share what I've learned with others. And my parents suggested I write down what I've learned, and I thought writing this article would be a good way to share it through the diabetes community. And I'm also interested in pursuing research as a career, and how cool would it be for me to publish an article in a professional scientific journal?
You will have published more in scientific journals by this one article than all of the, should you go to medical school, then like everyone in your class during your first through third year of school. So congratulations. You know, in the article, you discussed so many things, and one of the phrases that struck me was surviving is not the same as thriving, because what we all really want to do is not just get through the day, but really thrive through the day. And you discuss so many things that helped you, one of them being a team of healthcare providers that supported you. That included, if I remember, a pediatric endocrinologist, a dietitian, a certified diabetes care and education specialist, a social worker, and many others. It sounded like you had a great team. Nathan, can I ask you, what does thriving with diabetes mean to you, and how did that team help you achieve that?
Yeah, so to me, thriving is managing my blood sugar while getting to feel like a quote-unquote regular kid, not limited by diabetes. My care team was really the foundation of this. They obviously taught me the basic diabetes tasks like dosing insulin and carb counting. Also, talking about the long-term complications of diabetes really gave me motivation to work hard to manage my blood sugar. But also super important was that my care team gave me strategies that helped me do the same activities as my peers, like running cross country or scooping ice cream at an ice cream shop. I mean, for example, my endocrinologist suggested strategies like reducing my basal insulin setting on my insulin pump in the hours before exercise so that my blood sugar would be less likely to go low and I could keep running without being interrupted by my blood sugar going low. Another example is that the social worker suggested that my parents and I try to minimize conflict around my blood sugar management and leave my blood sugar management out of other conflicts we may have been having. And what she also suggested was for my parents not to criticize me when I, forgot to pre-bolus or didn't wait after dosing before eating, which I think really helped make the whole diabetes experience more positive. And also, my parents criticized me enough for not unloading the dishes.
Having diabetes in many ways crystallizes the importance of working together as a team with your parents and parents not criticizing overly on so many aspects of things, right?
Absolutely. I think my parents were super important after I was diagnosed, and I mean, as I start thinking about going to college and planning for college, I think they'll still be an amazing resource.
Yeah, I'm sure they will be. And I love the way you described how your parents helped you when you needed help. Like you would offload some of the, if you were feeling a little overwhelmed, that they would remind you, not criticize you, but kind of help lead you.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I struggled with in the first few months to year after being diagnosed was remembering to do all of the things like pre-bolusing and all of these new habits and tasks that I had obviously never done before I was diagnosed. And yeah, I found it super helpful that my parents were always there to like help, like remind me, like you said, to pre-bolus or help me carb count, and but also giving me some independence. They didn't do everything for me, but to like now, like 5 years later, they still, when I'm feeling burnt out from all the diabetes management for like a couple days, they'll totally take over my blood sugar management and like carb count everything for me, and sometimes they'll dose insulin on my insulin pump for me, just to like give me a little break.
We all need to be able to acknowledge when we need some help and rely on each other.
It's so great to have that mindset, Nathan. And what I'm hearing a lot from you in terms of what it means to you to be thriving is related to that mindset of you have each of these self-management tasks to do, and you're able to figure out ways to integrate them as smoothly as possible so that you can thrive through your day-to-day activities, do the various activities you enjoy that you may have felt limited by if you were not able to have these resources and additional support. And the mindset around that, I think, is so important. Of you're never going to probably be able to just ignore this, right? You can't just say, I don't have diabetes today, I'm not going to worry about this. But it's about finding ways to integrate the care of your diabetes and the self-management tasks day to day as smoothly and efficiently as possible. And something I'm really liking that you're sharing, and I think is important for others to hear, is that you don't have to do it alone, especially as someone who's still learning to live with this day to day. I think finding that support team, your resources who can help in those times where you're having more challenges, or maybe you're in finals week or the stress of other things going on, because this is still a newer skill to you and it's something you're growing and learning through. And of course, like you mentioned, there's going to be more transitions that certainly come in the future as you become more and more independent, go to college, live on your own. But this is the time to learn those skills while still having that safety net of support. So I'm so glad to hear you're able to thrive through each of these pieces. Now, one of the things I heard you talk about was sports, and I'm also someone who loves sports. I wasn't a cross country runner, I was a track runner, volleyball player, but certainly glucose is such an important factor when you're thinking about the activities you do and athletic activities. What has been your experience in managing your type 1 diabetes while playing sports?
So I ran cross country and track for 3 years of high school, and overall, like it was a super fun experience. In terms of diabetes management, I felt like it was a huge success. I think one of the things that stood out to me the most was the importance of teamwork. I initially during freshman year, I couldn't convince any of my friends to join the team with me, so I didn't know anyone on the team. So no one knew I had diabetes, including the coaches. And my parents didn't really feel safe leaving me at practice by myself. So the solution was for the school nurse to give a teaching session to my coaches so that they would know how to recognize the symptoms of low blood sugar and how to give glucagon and what to do in an emergency, which definitely made me and my parents feel a lot more comfortable. And then also once I started to make more friends on the team, I had like running buddies who, if my blood sugar went low while we were running and I had to stop or walk for 10 to 15 minutes, they would stop and walk with me. And they also, we also showed them how to give, so that made me feel a lot more comfortable. In terms of blood sugar management, there are two things I really think about with exercise. The first is managing my blood sugar during and immediately before the exercise, which I found to be a little stressful because it was all about trying to avoid lows during runs, both for my physical safety, but also because like I don't want to go, like, I want to keep running. I'm there to run. I'm not there to take a break because my blood sugar is low. And also, initially, like I talked about, none of the kids on the team knew I had type 1 or knew anything about it. So, they would see me walking, and it's like, I don't want them to think I'm like, like cheating or so that was a little maybe awkward or embarrassing. And so, but eventually I got to know them better. And I think maybe one of the things that's important to recognize is that with diabetes, like we may have to do like weird or uh, embarrassing things, and that's okay.
Nathan, it strikes me as you say that. I think we often, particularly when we're in our teens, think about things we do as awkward or embarrassing. And I wonder if having had, in a sense, the opportunity to deal with that so explicitly through your diabetes, do you feel it has made you, in some ways, a more comfortable person with yourself?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I noticed as I was saying that I was really thinking about this through the context of like how other people see me. And I think certainly that's an important theme of high school, right? Is like teenagers,
Yeah.
I think, care what other people think of them. And I think, yeah, my experiences with, walking while I was
Yeah.
supposed to be running, gave me a lot of confidence and made me feel more comfortable.
Yeah, in some ways, it's what we all struggle with as we are teenagers. And you had a particular area where it was explicit that it sounds like actually helped you in that struggle. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you another question that makes me curious about the need to be responsible with regard to your diabetes, because in many ways it is not a forgiving disease for irresponsibility, right? For, the need to be responsible with your diabetes, again, something so explicit. Do you feel it has helped you with taking on many of the responsibilities that otherwise often are tough? running track, getting to the ice cream store on time for your job, things like that.
Yeah, I think one of the main things having diabetes taught me is, or getting diagnosed with diabetes taught me, is how to stick to habits. Because there's like brushing my teeth and whatever, showering, but it's totally different when it's, like I actually have to remember to pre-bolus before meals, which I think helped me. I developed strategies like setting alarms and timers that then helped me remember to get to work on time or to scoop ice cream.
Exactly. I think in my brain as a pharmacist here, I'm thinking about the comparison of taking medications consistently on time and on a schedule is difficult for everybody. And it's something that when you build in those habits, it can be really helpful. But as Neil alluded to, type 1 diabetes is an area where it's not as forgiving. If you miss a dose of your medication, you'll get that immediate feedback if you're using certain technologies to see, well, I clearly missed this dose. Here's where my glucose is now. Or if I didn't have certain supplies with you at the time, you feel the reflection of that a bit more than maybe other people who miss a vitamin or something like that. So it does help you to build in those habits. Absolutely. And I can tell you're someone who is taking this very seriously and diligently, and you're very proactive, clearly, by sharing your story here. But you're certainly not alone in overcoming some of these challenges. And so I think what you're sharing today will be really useful. Neil, what are your thoughts?
Well, I so agree with you, Sarah. I'm going to shift a little bit to another aspects of sports while we're still on sports that you talked about in your article. And that was that first season playing track after you had diabetes was really tough. And then, and I'm going to quote from your article, my family had learned how to better advocate for me. And so that's what led to the nurses teaching your coaches. And it's such an important thing for our listeners to understand, which is why I'm calling that out, that learning to be one's own advocate, learning one's family, we all have trouble saying, I need something different than others. But it sounds like that was really a critical piece that your parents had the ability, the wisdom to say, hey, we need to, pay attention to this. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's another thing is that my parents sort of modeled advocacy for me. My dad takes more of a, hands-off approach, like let Nathan, like we'll guide Nathan, but he'll figure it out, whereas my mom is more directly helping me. But yeah, I think that's absolutely one of the things I learned from diabetes is how to have confidence and how to ask for help when I need it. So I don't know, another example of this is when my blood sugar goes low in class, and if it goes low enough, I'll go to the nurse's office. But it's sort of weird to, at least in middle school, in the first few months after I was diagnosed, getting up to, talk to my teacher and say like, hey, I need to leave class to go to the nurse's office. Um,
What I'm thinking too is just from my own experience reflecting on, I had a teammate in volleyball growing up who had type 1 diabetes, and that was really my first exposure to seeing someone perform those self-management skills day to day and through different activities and through sports and seeing hypoglycemia occur. And I'm thinking of your experience and what an opportunity to educate the others around you. You've, as you've grown more confident, began to share your story. And now you have friends and teammates who know how to manage hypoglycemia and to help others. And that's something that they may not have learned otherwise through their time being a high school student. And thinking about the experience you've had for your educators as well. It sounds like you've got great teachers, coaches, nurses at the school who maybe expanding their skill set a little bit. We had an episode last summer about safety in school with diabetes and some of the measures that need to be put into place. And advocacy was something we really talked quite a bit about during that time, because some schools maybe didn't have nurses who were as trained within diabetes management, and making sure everyone is aware of the necessary steps and how to make sure you have a safe environment to learn and thrive day to day. So I appreciate you sharing your story with us, but also I'm thinking about the impact that you're having just on those immediately around you and how much they're learning from you day to day. It's really impressive.
It is. If we can shift gears a little bit now to talk about diabetes technology, because over the last few years, diabetes technology has changed a great deal. You talked a bit about that in your article. Can you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, so I think the main benefit of the technology for me was that the no more giving 5 to 10 shots and finger pricks a day. It was just the physical, you know, pain. It was just so much nicer. It was obviously much easier to give boluses with the insulin pump, especially correction boluses. When I first got the insulin pump, I really only gave doses at the same time as I had given injections. I gave the same number of doses with the insulin pump as when I was on shots. Just because I think initially I was sort of uncomfortable with the idea of being so reliant on technology. But now I give like 10 to 15 boluses a day. It's just like so quick. It's like instinctive. Like I don't really think about it. Like I just open my insulin pump and press some buttons, and like it's in 2 seconds and it's done. I think one of the other benefits of technology is that it's so much less conspicuous. So whereas before, if I was giving myself a shot of insulin, like in public, I would always, of course, get some questions about it. But with the technology, like no one, I'm so fast, no one sees me. Plus, I can dose from my phone now, which is super convenient. Technology also gave me a lot more independence from my parents. So they can watch my blood sugar and make sure I'm okay without like texting me like, "Hey, Nathan, did you check your blood sugar? Like, how are you feeling?" And it also along with that, it gave both me and my parents sort of the peace of mind of like, there's this, I don't know, I think of it as like a device that's kind of watching over me.
I love that analogy and the way that technology has been so useful for you. It sounds like there are certainly some challenges and learning curves when you're getting used to different technologies, but it sounds like the benefits have certainly outweighed those challenges from both this perspective of your ease of medication administration, the reassurance from getting those glucose readings, and having that family support. I think for your family as well, I'm sure that feels very reassuring as you start to become more independent in your glucose management, having them be able to have that eye where they can keep an eye on things and see how you're doing without having to have as many of those conversations. Because as you said earlier, sometimes that can lead to conflict, or as you become more independent, wanting to have a little breathing room to learn and grow through your process as well. So it certainly sounds like you've had quite a few wins there.
So we only have a few minutes left. Nathan, do you have any final thoughts to share with our listeners?
I think what's most important with diabetes is that recognizing that you can be like a regular person, quote unquote regular person. It doesn't have to limit you. It does. I don't feel limited in any way. I think, I don't know, it's super important to take advantage of resources, and I have to remember to advocate for myself, but I shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. I think in the beginning, getting diagnosed with diabetes was sort of scary, but it only gets better.
That is wonderful. Sara, any thoughts you have to share?
I'm so appreciative of this conversation today. I'm so glad you could join us, Nathan, to share a bit more about your story. I loved your article. I love everything that you shared on your podcast today, and really admire your vulnerability. I'm hoping that if there are any teens in the listening audience or parents of teens, that they've been able to just hear how positive Nathan is about his experience. While it can be a challenge to make these adjustments to integrating different diabetes self-management skills and integrating diabetes care into your day-to-day life. It's very clear from Nathan's experience that when leaning on resources, having support, and advocating for yourself, you really can thrive with type 1 diabetes.
Sarah, that was wonderful. Nathan, I too am so appreciative of you sharing your story. And there's so many things that you said that really resonate to me as very important and important for all of our listeners to recognize and grow from. And standing out there is the importance of teamwork. And teamwork is everyone. It is your healthcare providers. It is your family. In the article, you mentioned your brother. You mentioned friends. We don't live in isolation. And to take advantage of that team, you share that there are times when things get overwhelming. And I think that's really important for our listeners to understand. It's not just that Nathan is able to achieve everything because he's a superpower, but because as a person you're able to say there's times where you need help. And thanks so much for sharing that piece as well. And it's important for our listeners also to recognize part of that team is the American Diabetes Association. There are a lot of resources on the website. Please take advantage of them. Finally, that idea of thriving. It's what we all want in our lives, and the ability to look at whatever we have in our lives, type 1 diabetes being an important thing, and not saying, how just do I deal with it, Nathan, because you said it so well. You've learned things from it that are allowing you to do well in school, allowing you to work at the ice cream store, allowing you to run cross-country track. So how we learn from everything that we encounter. Again, so appreciative you're joining us. And of course, our appreciation always goes, most of all, to our listeners, to our audience. Thank you for joining us, and come back next month where we'll discuss travel and disaster preparation for people with diabetes. For the American Diabetes Association, I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik. Thank you for listening.